All right, you are now live.
Thank you. And welcome to the committee members. This is a meeting of the HRM's Active Transportation Advisory Committee. And the date is February the 15th and the time is 4:37 or something. My name is Hugh Millward. I will be chairing the meeting. And the first thing is for us to do a roll call so that everyone can state their name and we can see you. So I'll just go through the list of members. Douglas Wetmore is our vice chairperson.
Present, Hugh.
Thank you, Douglas. Councillor Patty Cottle.
Yep, I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone.
Peter Zimmer.
Here, present finally.
Thank you, Peter. Holly Woodall.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be back again.
Hello, Holly. You
Can't
might
hear
need
me?
to, well, not very well. If you can perhaps get a little closer to the microphone.
Okay. Can
Okay.
you hear me now?
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. Paul Young.
Yes, hello, hi. Yes, good afternoon.
Hello, Paul. Annika Ropel.
Hello, here and present.
Thank you, Annika. Milena Casanovicius.
Right here, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Milena. Michelle Mahoney.
Present, sir. Milena, that's you. You must have trained Hugh very well and the last name. Wow, that was great. Good job, Hugh.
Okay. Miles McCormick. Has Miles
not joined us yet.
Okay. And Brittany McLean.
I'm here, thanks.
Thank you, Brittany. And we have regrets from Elizabeth Pugh. We also have with us our support staff, David McIsaac, Manager of Active Transportation. Is David with us? Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, David. Hello, David. And Elizabeth McDonald is our Legislative Assistant.
Hello.
Hi, Elizabeth. Okay, so the minutes from the previous meeting of January the 18th were circulated, the draft minutes, and I'll ask if there were any errors or omissions noted. Well, hearing none, I'll call for a motion to approve the minutes as circulated.
I can approve those, Hugh. Douglas here.
Thank you, Douglas. You've moved it. We need a seconder.
Milena seconds.
Thank you, Milena. All those in favor of the motion is to approve the minutes as circulated. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 In unison. And anyone opposed, please say nay. Okay, none opposed. So the motion is approved as and the minutes are approved as circulated. So we'll move on to approval of the order of business as circulated. Elizabeth, are there any additions or deletions to the order of business that was circulated?
There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. Then in that case, do any members of the committee have anything to add to the agenda?
Yeah, if anyone has anything they'd like to add, they could certainly ask to add that to the agenda.
Yeah.
I could give a little update on something. On walkways.
Okay, so Elizabeth, where would that go?
So that would be under section 10, which is added items. So I'll probably, let's say that's item 10, Councillor Cuttle. You said it was on walkways, Councillor Cuttle? Okay, update on walkways. So then we'll need a motion. If no one else has any items they'd like to add, We'll just need a motion for the agenda to be approved as amended.
Okay. Do we have a mover?
Malena moves.
I'll
Okay,
second.
Sorry, who was seconding?
Annika.
Oh, Annika seconded. Okay. So with that amendment, the order of business, we're moving the order of business. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
And thank you. And anyone opposed, please say nay. No opposition. So that the agenda is approved with that amendment for item 10, added items from Councillor Kittle. Just make a note of that. Okay, thank you. So now we, oh, by the way, I realize I have missed an important item at the beginning before the roll call. I should have actually given the land acknowledgement. I will read it now. My apologies. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Back to the agenda as circulated. So business arising, item 4, there is none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. If any committee members have a conflict of interest, they feel they have a conflict of interest, now is the time, with regard to the agenda, and now is the time to declare it. Hearing none, there is no conflict of interest. Item 6 is consideration of deferred business. This is the presentation from Matt Stickland on Legal Road Users Bicycle Club, an introduction to that club. Matt Stickland is with us.
So he's in the meeting. I'm just promoting him to panelist right now so he can present.
Okay.
I believe he will just be delivering a verbal presentation. He won't be using slides, so we'll just wait till he accepts the invitation to be promoted.
Okay.
All right, Matt is now in the meeting, or he's on one of the panelists now, so he can present. Can you hear us, Matt?
Yes, can you hear me this time?
Perfect, yes.
Yeah, yes,
And
we
you-
can see you. We can see
Oh,
you and
excellent.
hear you, Matt. This is Hugh Millward, the chair. So you are free to begin your presentation. You have 10 minutes that is available to you. And then we'll follow that with any questions or comments from the committee. So away you go.
Perfect. Yeah. So first off, I just want to say thanks again for giving me the opportunity here to present. I would also like to apologize for my chaotic presentation last time. I had a pretty hard out with having to go pick up my kid before Excel, stopped at 6 o'clock. Anyway, so I just want to apologize for that. Yeah, so I'm the president of the Legal Road Users Bicycle Club, and we are a bicycle club in the HRM that is focused on trying to make the streets safer for people who are not in cars. Where we are different than other advocacy groups is that where other advocacy groups tend to focus on the legislative or the executive, i.e. they organize to try and convince politicians that what they want to do is a good idea, and then try and gain public support, change legislation in that way. We're focusing instead on demonstrating what the issues are in hopes that people smarter than ourselves come up with solutions, because what we think we are the best at is pointing out how people will break things or use things improperly and giving people an opportunity to plan better infrastructure in that way. And why we have chosen to do this is because the Motor Vehicle Act and a lot of our legislation, a lot of our priority plans, a lot of the guiding documents that we have are written as though every single person who uses our transportation network is equal, or depending on the planning document, is more equal than others. 2 feet good, 4 feet better, or 4 feet good, 2 feet better type thing. But in that case, but our infrastructure is not designed in that way. Our infrastructure is designed to be automotive first to the detriment of everything else. And when our rules are written one way and our infrastructure is built another way, that provides a lot of room for gray, for misinterpretation, for exploitation of the rules, especially when you consider the fact that things like enforcement and education, which have so far been the municipalities' favored risk mitigation strategies, are largely ineffective as they are currently being used. Education campaigns, for example, are only effective when it's trying to teach people about a specific behavior change you are trying to see, i.e., if we had a public education campaign to say, we are no longer turning right on red, that is perfect. A generalized education campaign saying, hey, everyone just kind of be safer all the time doing a bunch of things is not an effective education campaign. And yet we tend to rely on this type of intervention or risk mitigation, which is largely ineffective. And so we want to demonstrate a lot of the ways in which this kind of engineering last, education first, safety approach produces bad outcomes, and in a lot of cases, lethal outcomes. And so, how we do this is we kind of let to abridge a very complex set of ideas. Essentially, we abide by the foreign policy school of realism, which is to say, whatever people will do, if there's nothing preventing them from doing it, they will do it. And we make our plans based on that, because we know that in demonstrating a lot of the vulnerabilities that exists with our built infrastructure will expose a lot of us to violence, either careless violence or neglectful violence from drivers who just aren't paying attention when there are more pedestrians than they expect, or more cyclists than they expect, for example, to people that are openly hostile to people not in cars, which I'm sure that anyone who is on this specific committee is probably well aware with that kind of anger that drivers often have to people who are not in cars. And we obviously don't want to be putting ourselves at risk unduly. And also we want fundamentally to see the city to be a better place. We're not trying to, although we are going to be a little bit of, S-disturbers, as it were, we would much rather things just be safer. So we kind of wanted to make this introduction, and we wanted to provide, let you guys know that we existed and kind of offer our services as like a red team stakeholder, as it were. Because when we're doing our risk assessment, we are thinking through how we could use the infrastructure in ways that could be exploited, that could be dangerous, to highlight that. And we're also looking at the rules to see what is allowed, to make a point between the difference between what is allowed by the rules and what is allowed by our infrastructure. And this type of planning is not planning that we see consistently demonstrated in HRM planning. HRM planning tends to stick more to black and white. For example, the Right on Red report, that the two Right on Red reports from 2020 and 2022 or 23, I think, in both of those cases, staff are saying in the staff reports that, well, because the traffic laws are what they are, they won't be broken. And since no one's going to break the traffic laws, that's what makes an intersection safe. And again, as basically everyone on this committee, I'm assuming, knows, that's not true. But that kind of formalized feedback, we don't really see reflected in the HRM's planning processes. So we were hoping that maybe we could, help in that way. And the other thing that we think we can contribute is sometimes things happen where, the rules have been broken in a way that are, maybe not malicious, and I don't think malicious at all in this case, but provide an opportunity for change, especially change that we might want to see. For example, I keep talking about the 30 kilometers an hour, slow the blazes down presentation that Paul Young gave in November's meeting. Now, to be clear, Chair, I'm going to say that you broke the rules of order, and I think that you did, and I don't think that's malicious, and I don't think that's bad in any way, shape, or form. But what I am saying is, because it was outside of the rules of order, that gives an opportunity for you to reconsider this motion if you want, especially if you have someone in the legal road users giving you a presentation saying, that HRM's charter, section 318 specifically, allows the HRM to design streets however they want. And also the province sets speed limits, but there's nothing preventing the city from designing streets slower than those speed maximums. In fact, the Provincial Traffic Authority told me that they don't change the speed limit until the streets are designed for the speed that they want the speed limit changed to, which is why the HRM is having a lot of issues lowering its speeds. We think because our roads are designed for like 100 kilometers an hour, so of course they're not going to put a posted speed limit of 30. So yeah, that's the type of thing that we want to do proactively. We would rather have conversations to demonstrate vulnerability as opposed to demonstrations to demonstrate vulnerability, because that puts us at risk. And it's ultimately a more hostile and conflicting relationship. And I think we're all working towards the same thing. We're just coming at it from a very different perspective, because quite honestly, our streets are dangerous and we're tired of risking death just to go to work. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so we are now a group of people who are kind of at the end, and we're willing to take the drastic action we want to see in the city. But we'd rather it be proactive and collaborative instead of conflicting and destructive. So we figured we'd do a kind of, hey, we can be a red team for your active transit planning if you want. If there's something that you would specifically want to know, how people would be abusing a piece of infrastructure, how people would use it dangerously, how people would use it selfishly without thinking about it, that type of thing, which seems to be absent from HRM planning. We are more than happy to do that table-topping risk assessment, because it's what we're doing anyway for our own planned or potential protests or activism. So yeah, that's kind of the end of my pitch. I know I have 10 minutes, but I kind of got through half of it last time. So if you guys have any questions, I'm here to answer questions. I wish I had more details. We were supposed to have a meeting, our AGM on Tuesday, where we're starting our whole planning process for this summer's activities. But obviously the weather kind of messed that up. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I'm sure there are some questions or comments, and I'm going to go through a speaking list here to give everyone a chance to speak. I'll start with Miles McCormick. Oh,
Sorry, Miles is not in the meeting.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed so he's not here. Brittany McLean. Brittany?
Hi, sorry, I don't have too many questions. I had someone come to my door during this, so I apologize. But Matt, nice to meet you, and welcome to the world of cycling advocacy, and I'm sure we'll connect in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brittany. Milena Casanavicius.
Thank you. Hi, Matt. So I have a few questions. One, starting with how big is your group? Two, the backgrounds of your group, particularly yours. I believe you are a journalist. I'll start with those three, and I have perhaps two or three more.
Yeah, sure. So our group right now, our kind of like active and dedicated membership base is about a dozen. We haven't done much in-person meeting at this point. And also we've been doing most of our kind of functional organizing and planning in the tail end of the fall and into the winter. So our recruitment drives, have been relatively limited. And we've been, or I guess initially it was just me, but focusing on recruiting people who are, as I'm sure anyone in an activist space will know, finding people who are willing to actually volunteer and spend time, especially in the initial core group, is very important. So that's kind of what I've been concentrating on building first. We have about 12 people at this point, as I said. I expect us to balloon relatively quickly in the spring. But yeah, our backgrounds are, relatively diverse at this point. We're mostly, like, again, we're still pretty fragmented. Our meeting space is just online at this point. Our physical meetings have been limited to like smaller numbers. So I can't actually give you a more fulsome demographic of kind of our organization. But if that's something you want, I'm more than happy to kind of like put together a more comprehensive list or demographic list or what have you. And yeah, for me, I'm a journalist. I I'm British by birth and then immigrated here when I was 6 months old. Joined the Navy in my early 20s, did that for a while, went and fought a war, didn't have a good time, came back, needed to find other work. And yeah, I've been working covering City Hall, kind of as a, yeah, just it's something I'm able to do and want to do. And so that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay, thank you. So a few more, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. I appreciate you coming here. Part of me wonders if you fully understand we are an advisory committee. I think something like this would do a lot more justice towards the Transportation Standing Committee, perhaps radio and television as well. We more than likely, every single one of the committee members here would agree with you that the streets are not safe, in particular since COVID. And I, as a person who is blind, have every meeting commented on some incident that has happened to me. I'm a very good traveler with my guide dog. I'm still confused, particularly that you're a journalist, on how you propose to do research to get, from what I'm hearing, the information that, people are breaking the law. Are you going to stop these cyclists? Or, how do you propose to do all this? I'm a little confused on what your point is, and so I'd like that answered, please. And then second, just a small suggestion to you that, keep reaching out to all other groups, because as a stakeholder, you probably will be called in, and your group at some point, from different organizations and whatever happens. And do remember that we are an advisory committee. What we can do is advise, but we really don't have a lot of clout, sadly. So to go back to my question is how you propose to do your research on to prove that, people are breaking the law. You're going to chase them around and then you're going to stop them?
No. So just to your first question, yeah, no, I'm very aware that this is an advisory committee. To me, advisory committees are the most fun because there is not a lot of institutional support for advisory committees, and a lot of the suggestions. Personally, I think advisory committees in the HRM are doing a disservice by not being just like a little bit crazier with their suggestions. But no, I know it's an advisory committee, and I know the suggestions from this committee can be, taken or rejected by the Transportation Standing Committee as they see fit. But for me, the point of advisory committees is to do this kind of outside the box creative thinking and kind of throw it at council and say, hey, we came up with this idea. We think it's good. You guys should seriously look into it. Not that I expect things that come out of this advisory committee will go to council one for one and be like accepted as gospel. But every good idea starts from somewhere. And I think advisory committees are where a lot of the seeds of a lot of the good ideas come from. As far as how do we know that cyclists are breaking the law? Because I read the MBA and I know how I ride my bike.
And that means what? You're breaking the law too? I'm smiling for those who can't see me.
I'm going to say I will ride in a way that it most ensures that I am safe, even if that is in contravention of the Motor Vehicle Act.
Okay, so that is you, but then how do you propose to bring forth any research from anybody else that you witnessed doing this?
Oh, sorry. No. Okay. So when I'm talking about risk assessment tabletopping, it's not necessarily research. It's more thinking about how people could or would use infrastructure and then planning for those outcomes. That's not the research part of things is not what we think we are necessarily good at, although I think I personally am good at research. What we are more suggesting is that we will provide avenues to research that other people might not be thinking about because we potentially ride differently, more aggressively, more realistically, what have you. And by the same token, there are people who are aggressive regardless of the vehicle that they're on. whether that be a scooter, bike, or car, what have you, and kind of accounting for or assuming that drivers will have aggressive behavior and trying to predict or plan how that would interact with our infrastructure. That's not necessarily something we would want to research, but it is something we would want, potential vulnerabilities we would want to point out or make sure that are highlighted for research by engineers and professionals. That's what we're kind of saying here. Does that make more sense?
End of thoughts for now. Thank you. I might come up with something the second round. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Milena. Michelle Mahoney, you have questions or concerns?
Hi, Matt. Thanks for coming. So I'm kind of a little confused too. With like if you have certain rules and regulations, if you will, like doesn't everybody have, like everybody has to get it, right? Like all riders, drivers, everybody has to kind of be following the same rules and regulations for everything to work out. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And we think that's the assumption that goes into a lot of the planning, that because we have a common set of rules, everyone will follow that common set of rules.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is that we know from our experience that's not true. And what we want to do is give the city a voice, a reliable voice to say, here is how people will predictably break the rules that we have with your planned infrastructure. Okay. That's the advice and guidance we want to be able to provide, because that's the type of risk assessment that we are doing. And it's the type of risk assessment that we don't, like, that's the type of risk assessment we're doing to keep ourselves safe in our planned protests. And it's not the type of risk assessment we're seeing in our engineers' infrastructure design. And for us, that's a bit of an issue. So that's why I wanted to, make this presentation. And yeah.
And then what about people that don't even wear helmets and stuff when they drive or ride a bike? Sorry.
So for me, I don't want to speak for the whole group on this one because this is a bit of a personal opinion, but I don't think not wearing a helmet should be a death sentence. So even if it's not allowed, even if whatever, right now our infrastructure is built that if I don't wear a helmet and I do get hit, or if I don't wear a helmet, I'm likely to get hit and die regardless of whether or not I'm wearing a helmet. And wearing a helmet or not wearing a helmet is kind of like a little bit of a, anyway, sorry, I got a little bit distracted there, but I think the helmet thing is a bit of a red herring because it puts the onus on me for my safety when the streets are designed for me not to be safe. And the 1 or 2 ton vehicles I'm sharing the road with are designed to protect the people inside those cars. And yet I'm responsible by regulation, and the streets are designed by regulation, and I'm responsible for my own personal safety marginally with a helmet. Like, so yes, I understand people should wear helmets. I understand, I understand all of that. But if we're talking about helmets, for me, we're failing because we're not talking about infrastructure. Like the helmet thing for me is far, far later in the debate.
Okay. Also, though, like you could be the best rider in the world. And, like I was coming downtown, I had to go downtown today for a meeting first thing. And, I'm on, I know the street, North Street or so, but there was 2 lanes. I was going to the roundabout to go downtown, and there are 2 lanes of cars, and like a bicycle comes up in between us and goes right through. Like you have such, I guess, confidence. And riders have such confidence that and I mean, so I have a physical disability and I could never ride a bike. So I always say, I love it when people say it's just like riding a bike because I can't ride a bike. So sorry for those that know me. I joke about my disability a lot. So I could say that. I love to say it's just like riding a bike because I can't ride a bike. Anyway, so sorry about that. But yeah, like I just like watching this guy this morning, I just, and it just really freaks me out sometimes when riders come right up on the right side of your car, and there's not a lot of, and I get the car road share, and I'm constantly aware of my surroundings and if there's a cyclist beside me, but but I mean, like cyclists do take their lives into their own hands, because it's again, you could be the best cyclist in the world and something could happen, right?
Yeah, so for me, and so lane splitting on so for me that comes down to a question of risk and which behavior is most risky. Because although it seems like lane splitting is the most dangerous thing for cyclists, and from the driver perspective, I completely understand why that feels true. What is actually most dangerous for me on my bike is following the rules of the road and spending more time in an intersection. So like the safest way for me to get through an intersection is to get through an intersection fastest, even if that means lane splitting. And to be honest, one of the ways that I've found, and I don't know if this is like official or whatever, but one of the ways that I found to most safely get through intersections is basically in a car's blind spot on the right-hand side, because that way, if they are turning right, I'm slow enough that I don't get right hooked. But if they're going through, then I'm protected from other vehicles. And that would feel very dangerous for the driver, but that is, for me, the safest thing, and it allows me to get through the intersection as fast as possible. So for me, it's a question of risk. And if I were to follow the rules of the road, if I were to wait in line with the other drivers and take my turn, the odds of me getting hit or killed in that intersection are far greater than if I were to lane split and ride through on someone's blind spot. So like, I understand completely why cyclists do it, and I understand that it is risky behavior, but at the same time, the real risky behavior is riding my bike on automotive infrastructure, right? Not how I'm riding my bike on automotive infrastructure, that I'm riding my bike on automotive infrastructure. Yeah. And then it's just a matter of what is the riskier behavior once you've already accepted that, you know, on your way to work today, you might die.
Okay, Michelle, does that answer your question?
Yeah, like definitely food for thought. This is great discussion.
Okay, thank you. Holly Woodill. Questions or comments, Holly?
Yeah, the issue I have here is that you're not following the rules of the road, therefore you can cause an accident. You may be riding through unscathed, but the chaos you leave behind you can be life-changing for people. If they hit you, whether it's another bicycle or a motor vehicle, and you die because you don't have a bicycle helmet on, that changes their life forever, because they have to live with what you caused. Do you understand?
At the risk of getting too personal, Amnesty International has a report out with an airstrike I called in on a wrong target. I am extremely aware of the potential consequences of my actions.
And follow the rules of the road.
So do you want to follow, Holly?
Oh, sorry.
I've got a puppy here interrupting me. You have to follow the rules of the road, and that's where my bottom line is.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you, Holly. Douglas Wetmore.
Yes, thank you, Hugh. So I'm understanding what you're telling me, Matt, a little bit differently than what I think the rest of the committee is understanding. And I want to share my perspective of what I'm hearing. And I want you to tell me if this is more in line with what your group is trying to put forward here. So you're talking about breaking the rules in the road, but you're not coming here saying that you're not trying to tell us that breaking the rules of the road is safer. You're trying to tell us you are breaking the rules of the road, and this is why, and here's what we need to focus on to fix it. So I'm going to give an example that maybe you'll have some experience with. I'm going to look at the Lower Water Street and Hollis bike lanes. Fantastic bike lanes, at least a Hollis one. Lower Water Street could be a little bit better, but overall, pretty good bike lanes, relatively separated. On the other hand, though, there's not really any way to get between the two. So if I'm going one way and then I need to turn around the other way, the legal option is to go up a very steep hill on a segment of road without a bike lane, painted or protected, in mixed traffic that is usually very dense and busy, especially at rush hour. What you're trying to tell me, your group would come here saying, if let's assume we're back in 20, whenever we were putting this proposal together, your group would have looked at this and said, I'm going to be honest, a lot of our group is going to ride on the sidewalk here, or they are going to go opposite direction on these bike lanes because it's not safe to actually switch between these back and forth. So thinking today, that's kind of what you would be doing. You're not coming here preaching to the crowd that everyone should break the rules of the road. You're coming here saying you expect people will break the rules of the road because it's going to be safer. Is my interpretation a little bit more in line with what you're putting forward?
Yeah, so I would say you got half of it nailed perfectly. Like, so for example, the McDonald bike bridge design, I think would do really well from our input, because I think a lot of our members will just ride down North Street and then hang a left from the automotive lane in the halfway point of the marked crosswalk, right? Like, that's a point of conflict that I don't think is considered in the design that a lot of our members, I think, would do, especially at low traffic, like not peak hour times. But the other thing that we're doing too is not saying that I'm not coming in here and telling you that we're advocating to break the law. What I'm telling you is that every single person on our road, in or on a vehicle, is breaking the law, and we are not planning for that. So we can give you our perspective from cyclists who are riding safe but potentially illegally, and we can also give you the perspective of how it is interacting with drivers that are also acting illegally. And if you don't believe me that drivers are acting illegally, just drive down Main Street or any of the roads with a 50-kilometer-an-hour posted speed limit, put your cruise control on, and see how you are the slowest person by about 20 or 30 kilometers an hour on that road. Every single person in or on a vehicle breaks the Motor Vehicle Act every single time they use our transportation network, and we are not planning for it as a city. That to us is the biggest issue that we want to highlight and help address.
And personally, I thank you for bringing this forward, because I think this is genuinely very good input that is sometimes missed in the planning discussion. I feel like Milena has already covered a lot of the points I could have brought up here, speaking about, unfortunately, there's not too much we can do. I mean, if you ask me, can keep pushing through council and keep pushing through other advocacy groups, and you will find you're in that way. At least from my perspective, you would have my full support on getting input, and I personally value the input because I think it is important. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. Councillor Cuttle. Councillor?
Yeah. Thank you. I have no questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Peter Zimmer.
Hi, thank you. Matt, thank you very much for coming and talking about this. A lot of your writing, a lot of your points fit in with my life experience as a product designer focused on usability. And the primary rule in that design process is, first, you look for how people fail and try and understand what really causes that failure to happen. We can't rely on a comprehensive rule book because not everybody will read the comprehensive rules, will understand them, will have the ability to put them into effect. I don't believe there is a single driver or a single cyclist or a single pedestrian who's really read and understood the whole of the Motor Vehicle Act and all the rules and regulations that flow from that. So yes, you're right. Most people will be continually, in some manner, violating the rules if a stickler enough comes along and says, oh, I'm going to give you a ticket for that. I'm 80. I've been temporarily mobility disabled for the last couple of months as I've had a total ankle replacement. I'm still in recovery. Soon I'll be back to being a cyclist and a vigorous walker. The city is not well designed. We need critics who will point out just where it fails. And some of the failure comes from the strong belief of many people that public service announcements are enough to educate people, to keep them up to speed on what the rules are, what people should do. There's a lot of research showing that's I'll try and be civil, a misinterpretation of the reality. PSAs don't work worth damn. You know, and to say, oh, we need more education. Well, not every form of education works. And I'm really pleased that you're pushing on this. I would make one comment about our forum, about our committee, about all of the committees, is now we're on public record. This is live streaming to anybody who has wanted to tune in. It's recorded and it's available for anybody to quote. It's Halifax public record. So if you make a presentation and you've got a really good point, you can do a video clip from that. You can do video clips from the responses that you get and say, oh, that's a public record. You know, we can use that as a tool as journalists or as citizens or disturbers to try and make those changes, to change the procedures throughout the whole of the bureaucratic structure of HRM, to give political candidates perhaps some good ammunition to go forward. So I'll step off my soapbox right now. And thank you very much for being here and presenting this.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I don't know whether that requires a response. So we'll take those comments. Paul Young.
Hi, Matt. It's great to see you, to hear you. I've certainly read some of your work as a journalist, and I certainly there's a place for asking questions and challenging the standard. And I really think that, especially in Nova Scotia, it's been my experience. This is just my personal experience, that we're extremely conservative and not really willing to move very far, very fast. So there's a place for that. Specifically, as I understand it, I think Douglas did a really good job in sort of fine-tuning the message that I think that we heard, and that's the way I heard it as well, is you call it a red ops or a black ops. I think of it as, in my former computer days, you'd be the hacker that would go in and tell us what was wrong. And there's opportunity for that, and Douglas can correct me, or David can as well, that every time or virtually every time there's a new project that's being started, that there's consultation. And that is an awesome place to bring your ideas, your thoughts, like everyone else. Everyone has, there's public consultation on most of these projects. And, listening, having a voice there, a slightly different voice is a very healthy thing. So I'll leave that. David will follow me and tell me I'm full of baloney, or maybe say that I've done the right thing. The last thing that I do want to say, and this kind of goes back to the adversarial type response that you've got at the beginning of this meeting, is the notion. I know what you're saying. I've ridden my bicycle now for some 50 years. I've gone from being aggressive to setting back and taking my role as more as a leadership one, and trying to get other cyclists to sort of see it that way too. And instead of breaking the law, to, the way that you want to, and I get what you're saying. Don't get me wrong. I get it. There's times where, it's easier to walk your bike on the sidewalk or whatever, or as you say, run through a red light or do whatever it is. But all you do in those sort of situations is you piss off other road users. That's what you do. And they take it out on the next cyclist they see. It might not be you. It might be, that woman who decided to try cycling for the first time with the basket on the front of her bike, and she'll never do it again. So I just caution you. No, I get why you've come here and your message. I think it's great, but I just kind of caution that kind of view. And you're right that there's drivers that do, and pedestrians and scooters, all road users are at sometimes breaking the law for their own benefit. But if you want to do it as a cyclist, all you're going to do is all cyclists are going to be painted the same way. And, an action that somebody else has done is going to be taken out on the next cyclist. So I just kind of wanted to share that as well, to sort of bear in mind. But Matt, I have, this disruptive, forward-thinking, push the envelope. I encourage you to continue to do that. And there are avenues within the public planning, the city planning routines where you can dovetail in and be very productive. So I hope that you take advantage of those. So thanks for coming back and talking to us.
Can I just clarify I think the breaking the law thing might have been a little bit misinterpreted off the top.
Yes,
but essentially, so essentially when I'm talking about breaking the law, what I'm talking about is planning if we can, and this will not be possible. I mean, well, except for like when we talked about going through the stop sign, for example, that's a little bit different. But when I'm talking about breaking the law as an organization, what I'm talking about instead is if there are ways we can break the law in a way that we think we can do so to set up the court case in such a way that we can change the precedent and start changing the conversation in the legal system about whatever the specific thing is. So when I'm talking about breaking the law as a legal road users bicycle club, what I'm talking about is doing so in such a way to force a conversation about a specific piece of law that we think is broken. Because the judicial system, you can't really, unless you're in power, the only way you can change that is through precedent or through case law or through actually engaging with the judicial system in some way. And in order to do that, you need to get a ticket or get arrested or something. So like, if we want to bring our protest, our conversation, our arguments to the judicial branch of the government, that will naturally involve getting arrested at some point, but that involves doing it in a way that requires a lot of planning to make sure that we're actually testing the case that we actually want to be testing. So when I'm talking about breaking the law, that's what I was talking about at the start there.
Thanks for the clarification. I'm not sure how this committee would be able to help you with that as sort of a planning committee.
Oh, no, that was just part of the context for who we are in the beginning.
Okay, thank you. Annika Ropel, do you have any questions or concerns?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my thoughts together. I think a lot of things have probably already been touched upon. I think, there are many ways to skin a cat and different approaches, and definitely that's why we see all the different advocacy organizations and different ways of getting in there and creating pressure. Yeah, I think to Paul's point, I think definitely the public engagement parts is definitely where I would direct folks. I know in the past, perhaps we've had conversations on this advisory committee about what our role is and where our power is in terms of what we can accomplish and what we can do. So I think this is a valuable conversation to have in terms of where the line is between the possible and the push for things that might not be realistic, but might push the needle a little bit. But yeah, anyways, that's it. I guess too, it is also like this piece of active transportation being there are lots of people at the table, and I find it's always humbling when I get to hear new perspectives. And so hearing about the perspective from the blind community, or from one blind person in the blind community, of different people with different abilities, and all of those things of how our roads, if we eliminate cars completely, how we still have lots of conflicts between road users and their personal needs. So again, always humbling. Not really questions, more comments. And yeah, you're welcome to reach out to the EAC at any time. Would love to grab a coffee.
Okay, thank you, Annika. I'm just going to throw in my own little comment. I think certainly the idea of intentionally breaking the law would rankle with some of us. I think the point about making sure that this particular group attends public meetings, public events on planned infrastructure, I think that's definitely a way to have an important influence. But the other thing is, from what you've said, Matt, is that in many ways, what you're aiming to do is get the Motor Vehicle Act changed in specific ways, where you see the law as it stands is currently creating dangerous situations. Am I right about that?
Yeah, and specifically too, from a strategic perspective from us, not to get too like behind the scenes about, but like there are MVA changes too that are, although they would likely be winnable fights, would likely have bad or not necessarily the outcomes we would want either. So yeah, that's exactly the intention. But so the laws that need to be changed, laws that can be changed, and laws that we think when they are changed will not be changed in a way that will make things unintentionally worse through that process. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask if anyone has any further comment or question. If so, just raise your hand.
This is Milena, if I may, just a very quick one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
So actually two quick ones. Matt, first of all, I commend you for standing here in front of us and taking all the S's you said, but solid S, because we're being recorded, we won't say that word. And I also appreciate the services you provided as Navy. So applaud you for that as well. And I will say to my dear friend, Mr. Vice Chair Douglas, I actually disagree with the lower water, and this would go to the point of the infrastructure not working. I understood everything you've said here. The lower water street bike lane does not work. I have had 3 friends, including an HRM person working on active transportation, get hit in that raised bike lane from the vehicles coming out of those parking lots. And what has happened since that was placed in is that more consultation is happening, and that goes through being involved and you know, I guess for you being here as well, now you've got your almost half an hour of conversation with us and yourself. And I'm a bit of a pit bull. Most of us on this committee have a bit of pit bulls. David knows that, you know, the people are coming and consulting with the users, that be cyclists, pedestrians, all road users, and starting to put us first and consulting to find out whether this will work or not. I think by doing somewhat of a civil protest would go a lot further than doing anything radical. The city is changing. I'm a little surprised at myself. I'm saying it is slow moving, but it is working. And once again, I commend you for being here and for bringing up your point. End of thought. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Milena. Anyone else with a final comment? If not, I'm going to thank Matt for coming back and giving us a more thorough presentation. And I think the comments actually were very useful. That yes, there was some disagreement about some points, but that's just fine. We have different views, and hopefully Matt will take our comments under consideration. And I imagine we'll be hearing more from him and about him. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda, correspondence.
Hugh, Peter
Yes?
has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Peter, you have your hand up.
Okay, just a quick kind of operational question. What I was saying about these meetings being the public record. Is there any provision or any possibility that the recorded comments could actually be available as a transcription? I mean, I'm thinking that the minutes are one record of what happens, and the video is certainly a valuable resource. But a transcript that could be scanned and worked over with your highlighter or whatever, is a very useful tool if we are going to say we're the public record.
That is a great question. I will have to take that back to the clerk's office, and I can definitely touch base with you about that. I agree that would definitely be useful, since I think there was a lot of useful things said here. But I can touch base with you on that, Peter, and if it is available, we can definitely look at having it distributed to members going forward.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. We'll hear back from you on that. So, Elizabeth, was there any correspondence received by the clerk's office?
No correspondence was received, and there were no petitions received by the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. And that takes us to item 8. Information items brought forward. I see that there have been none. Item 9 is our staff update from David McIsaac. David, would you like to go ahead with your update?
Sure. So during agenda review, I asked you if there's if there's anything in particular to focus on, and he kind of suggested maybe just a few of the bigger projects. So there were some questions about the status of making a safer connection to the McDonald Bridge Bikeway on the Halifax side. I think a good chunk of folks here were in a bit of a kind of a stakeholder meeting before Christmas, so that you got a bit of an update. So basically what we're working on right now is coming back to council with kind of a 2-phase sort of approach. One would be to have a safer connection sort of at grade using signals and cutting a hole in the fence, implementing that in 2025. We're still kind of ground truthing that and making sure that it can work safely, or as safe as possible. So still no final, I don't know exactly what we'll recommend to council, but that's being considered. And then the second thing would be to kind of look again at the overall kind of area between the bridgehead and Gottingen Street from more of a multimodal perspective, thinking about safer bike connections and pedestrian movements through there. And a big factor is transit movements and thinking about bus rapid transit in the future. So we're hoping to come to council with an update and get some direction in spring, early spring, April, May. So that's where that project stands. I can answer any details on that later on during questions. The Almond Street protected bike lane, protected from Windsor to Agricola Street, went out for tender last week. That one, so that, you know, that bodes well for relatively early construction. It's a project that's been delayed for a few years for a number of reasons. The biggest being the fact that there's been a fairly significant construction encroachment through the Westwood development there, Richmond Yards. Also, an example of where we've really had to work closely with a key stakeholder, the CNIB, that has a very important center there on Almond Street. So we're going to have our first half-height bike lane there in the city. That and a few other things. And there's been a number of discussions with Milena and others about that. Dutch Village Road, a big upgrade of Dutch Village Road will start in 2024. That will include protected bike lanes, a sidewalk, an actual sidewalk on Dutch Village Road on the west side that has never existed and has been a source of irritation and embarrassment. So we'll fix that. Section of local street bikeway on Isville between Duffus and Yonge Street to be built in 2024. A little bit of Liverpool local street bikeway, kind of the east end, will happen in 2024. And then onto the peninsula, there's a really the Brunswick Street protected bikeway, the bidirectional bikeway between Cogswell and the Central Library at Spring Garden Road is pretty much ready to go in terms of design and budget. What is less clear right now in terms of construction is the question of whether we can do that and do some of the Cogswell pieces, the significant Cogswell pieces that are going to happen in 2024. So still some discussions on when and how Brunswick can get implemented. There is lots of space outside of the regional center and lots of stuff we're doing. So I would say a kind of key project in 2024 in Cole Harbour will be to extend the Forest Hills Trail to Cole Harbour Road and then connect with the Bissett Trail, which will, you know, it's really one of those things where it's a gap of about 500, 600 meters, but it will, I think, basically connect Cole Harbour Place and those communities out to the Salt Marsh Trail and points beyond. So a pretty significant connection. And East Preston Greenway is looking good for construction in 2024 from the family, not from the Family Resource Center, from the East Preston Daycare to the East Preston Recreation Center. So those are some project highlights, I guess. Like with our group, we've been doing a lot of work in rural HRM to see if we can get some sidewalks built. Mostly we're talking about tax rates and area taxes to enable that. And I think that's going to be a barrier. We'll find out, but there is resistance. Huge surprise to changing tax rates or paying more taxes for sidewalks in rural community centers. So they're still needed. You know, in my opinion, they're desperately needed. There's lots of people in the community that want them. Lots of other rural communities in Nova Scotia would have them, but HRM doesn't yet. So, you know, still is a goal to get these done, but we will we'll see if the current tax rate mechanism is the way to do it. We've just finished engagement in Porters Lake and Musquodoboit Harbor. We'll be in Hubbards and Upper Tantallon in March and April, and then also in Lucasville. Those are our 5 communities. And there's lots of other stuff going on, but maybe I'll just leave it at that. And happy to take questions and, of course, follow up with any of you folks individually afterward if there's anything you're looking for more detail on.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Very good. I don't know whether I need to go through the roll call in its entirety. So perhaps if you have your hand up, we can take comments or questions. I see Brittany McLean has a hand up. So what's your question?
Yeah, sorry, I just have a quick one. I did see in the news the feedback and responses in Porters Lake, but I'm just curious, I hadn't seen anything about Musquodoboit Harbor. Was it similar feedback that you received? Oh, sorry, you're on mute there, David.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I would say that it's slightly different in Muscat Albert Harbor. Again, I haven't looked at all the responses yet. I'm just kind of going by what we heard at the public meetings. But I'd say there's definitely more interest in active transportation infrastructure and sidewalks in Muscat Albert Harbor from what we heard. But again, it gets what I'm finding is that there's partially sort of resistance just to this tax, but then there's also these deeper questions in HRM between rural HRM and urban HRM and what services you get for your taxes, and that is coloring a fair bit of the conversation.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Annika Ropel.
I had a similar question. Saw the news. My question was mostly, I feel like I misheard you because I think I was under the impression that the bridge miraculously might happen in 2024, but it is 2025. That is okay. I'm okay. I can wait. And then just a point of clarification, Brunswick and Cogswell, you're saying the budget's allocated and that they're all designed. Is it just why can't you do both at the same time? That's my question.
So I have that question as well, and people smarter than me, more familiar with construction and mitigation and stuff like that are looking into it now. I would say that part of the issue that we're just not sure about, or that my colleagues are not just sure about, is what's going to happen to overall traffic movements, buses, cars, especially when Barrington Street gets shut down, which is what's going to happen next year during Cogswell, and whether the side effects of that mean that it would be difficult to do any other construction projects in the downtown area. So that's what's being considered right now.
Okay, thank you. Milena, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. A quick comment as well. I wish the media wouldn't put those people who say they'll never use a sidewalk, because sooner or later everybody will use the sidewalk when they can no longer drive their car. And the tax issue, I hope HRM can figure that out. My question is, rumor has it that there will be a crosswalk installed on Windsor and Liverpool, the east side, the Forum side, correct? Rumor? Yeah. Okay. Can you tell me why? I'm leading you into a trap, David.
So a crossing, I think it's going to be either an RA5 cross or a RRFB kind of push button or a half signal. It would be at Liverpool.
Okay. For the sake of a cyclist, right? Oh, is he there?
I think we've lost David.
David, oh.
David, can you hear us?
He's deep in thought there.
No.
Your trap was a little too strong there, Milena.
He's still in the meeting.
He's gone out and he'll come back in. No.
Oh, all right.
David?
Hi.
Hi.
How far did you get there? How far did I get?
The RFB.
Yeah. So there's been a couple of reasons that we want to have some kind of signalized crossing at that location.
Number one?
To have a pedestrian crossing between Yonge and Almond Street, and to have a bikeway crossing to connect the Windsor Street bike lane to the Liverpool local street bikeway.
Okay. And you don't know how happy I am to hear that. I live 2 blocks from there. We've been lobbying HRM for 10 years at least. And it's always been no need, because the studies that went on there were from 9 o'clock in the morning till 3, not enough pedestrian crossing. However, I live across from the Forum, and the pedestrians jaywalking are constantly 6 o'clock at night and on for the hockey games, Christmas at the Joyful Forum.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I just want to make this very clear. I am more than pleased to finally see a crosswalk, because it's too long to be going from Almond to Yonge and Windsor. But I am a little, we'll say, wearing an itchy sweater, because I think the primary reason that has gone in is because of the cycling community. I'm so happy it's there. I just wish that we would remember that there are a lot of us who cannot cycle and still walk. And so just to keep that in mind. But I'm happier than a pig in mud to have it there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Milena.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you, Milena. Paul Young, and then Douglas Wetmore.
Okay, I'll be super quick. You have such an interesting and complex job, David. I'd sort of love it, but I'd also sort of hate it. My question was, you'd mentioned a half-height bicycle lane on Almond. I don't know what that is. If you could educate me a bit. Thanks.
Sure. So imagine, so ideally, we're able to separate a bike lane and the sidewalk with, some sod or, trees or something, that Melena's dog can recognize, and someone with a cane can recognize, and that sort of thing. We don't always have the space. So what we have been using are these tiles, these sort of directional tactile tiles, which have been used in some places, and we've been using them here. But what, the best guidance we've been getting is to actually kind of separate the bike lane and sidewalk vertically when they have to be together, so that, the sidewalk is at one level, the bike lane is sort of like halfway down, and then there's the curb to the street. That's kind of the next level down. Does that help? That makes sense?
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, Paul. Douglas.
Yes, so 2 quick comments from me. One is, I'm wondering if there's any, and there could be that I just haven't heard of, but I'm wondering if there's any updates on the bike lane that was planned for Morris Street and University Ave.
So you'll probably see a report at council for the University Ave section, and also for a section to connect up to Beaufort this spring. And we're still working on options to get from South Park Street down to Lower Water and Hollis. So including Morris, Clyde, and maybe South Street as well. So I would expect you might get we'll be doing some engagement on that later this year. So it hasn't gone away. It's still very much a priority, but we're trying to figure it out.
Okay, I'll be curious to hear more about that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, speaking of new crosswalks going in, I live nearby to the new crosswalk that was installed at Canard Street and Princess Place next to the Commons, which I don't know who was asking for that, but it is fantastic. Love that new set of lights there. And I'm wondering if this is less of a question, more so just a comment. There's a pathway at the end of Princess Street or Princess Place that connects into June Street and into kind of the suburbs side streets between Agricola and Roby Street. And if that pathway were to be repaved, Princess Place and that crosswalk would make for an excellent bike connection into some of the quieter, traffic calm streets between Agricola and Roby Street. So just wanted to highlight that, as that could be a small project that could make for a great connection.
I'll look at the property map as soon as we're done here, just to kind of better understand the lay of the land there. But I know what you mean.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Michelle Mahoney, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Hi, David. Thank you. I was again, not a cyclist, so I don't know, like, and as you all mentioned streets, I'm like picturing them in my head. And when you say like Morris and University and having a bike lane, like what does that mean? Does that mean like designated bike lane on University Avenue where it crosses Morris? Is that like, isn't there a bike lane there now? Or do you mean like when you cross, is it a cross, like on the crosswalk, or I'm sorry, I don't.
So the goal of that project, if you can imagine kind of the south end of the peninsula, it's to have like an east-west connection. So you could go from the Halifax Urban Greenway on Beaufort and Oxford Street, well, soon on Oxford Street, all the way down to the harbor front on Lower Water. And so there's a bunch of public engagement and options to look at, you know, how to do that. And so on University, it's going to be like you know, and it's going to have to be AAA bikeway, like safe, not painted, separated bike facilities. And
okay, so for example, I'm quite familiar with University Avenue because I used to work at Dalhousie and now I'm at King's. So there were many times, and I'm sure I've mentioned it once or twice or 7 times at these meetings that sometimes I've walked in the bike lane because it's safer than the sidewalk. So when you say, what did you call it? What did you call it? What is it? The bike lane is?
Well, they would be like kind of separated.
No, but when you say protected, sorry, you say protected bike lane, like what does that, I'm sorry, I hope it's not.
No, I'm happy to explain that. You know, that's sort of like what exactly that looks like is a little bit different depending, but basically there's some kind of physical separation, at least between the intersections, between where the cars are and where the bikes are. And that separation can be, you know, if you look on Hollis Street, for example, that separation is a 40 centimeter wide chunk of concrete curb. If you look on Rainy Drive, it's like a painted buffer with a bunch of bollards in it. And
University Avenue, let's go to that one first, for example.
Yeah, University Avenue, that's got like kind of a, you know, a very early kind of separation, and that's temporary. It's been temporary now for 5 or 6 years. But that would come out and be replaced by permanent infrastructure.
Okay. And is a permanent infrastructure like so right now there's bollards, for example, on University Avenue. And I mean, I have seen cars like drive in between, like to drop somebody off at a building or something, you know, which is dangerous for cyclists, of course. But with like with a protected bike, like what makes University Avenue the way it is now to a protected bike lane?
So, you know, what you have, what exists on University Avenue right now between Lamarchant and Roby is probably kind of the bronze level protected bike lane, if you want to call it that, or the participation prize.
Okay.
Yeah. And for it to be like more protected, you would, you know, obviously no more of those like lay-by zones where cars can come in and park, because that's defeats the purpose in a certain way. And when you do it permanently and are pouring permanent curb, you can actually like do it in ways that still have some of those loading zones, but next to them have the safer spot for the bike lane, so it doesn't get blocked.
Okay.
So what it could look like on University is sort of like those bike lanes with the curb moved out, or it could be using the median, kind of a bi-directional bikeway through the central median there.
And when it's going the same direction as cars are going, does that mean that bikes can only go bikes only go the same direction? Obviously, duh, that was a silly question. So, okay, end of thought of that. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And just to your point about like part of the other thing that's going to happen on University is like a more full rehabilitation of it, like wider sidewalks, better ped ramps, twizzies at the corners, maybe a little bit more public space kind of gathering, that kind of thing. So I think it needs an overall refresh, separate from just the bike infrastructure.
Yeah, it does. But one other quick comment. You were talking about the over by the bridge, and you were talking about tile, like surfacing or whatever. Is that tile like cobblestone?
No, I think what I was talking about is sort of like how you separate the sidewalk and the bike lane.
Okay.
And how you do that differs, depends on the location.
Okay.
But in some cases, in some places in Halifax where the bike lane and the sidewalk are at the same level, what we have separating them are these tiles, like that are intended to be detectable. They're
okay.
But I think a better way to do it is actually to separate it vertically.
Okay.
The best way to do it is to have like a row of trees or some kind of like sodding and stuff between them. But if you can't, the best way is to separate them vertically.
Okay, thank you so much for that explanation. And I'm so sorry that I took up the time from this meeting to find out all of that. I should have maybe asked you offline, but that was really helpful. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, fine. And I did see Annika Ropel had a hand up. Is that right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I'm coming in for round 2, and I think, Michelle, it's totally fine to ask these questions. It's a lot of jargon in here, and it's worth getting that confirmed, because I'm sure there are people who do listen to this who have no idea what is being said sometimes. Since we're playing Hey David, can we have a bike path here? I have a question about connecting the mainline in Clayton Park to the BLT. Is that, or Chain of Lakes, is that provincial land, or is that HRM land, or is that something anyone has ever considered? Because sometimes I look at that on a map and I'm like, those should touch.
So it's definitely been considered. There was a plan that showed kind of I might share it with you separately just because it's easier to. There was an awkward connection where we would have to build like a $3 or $4 million bridge across the 102. But what our preferred approach right now is to, when the province goes to update the intersection of Dunbrack Street and the 102, to coordinate with that and to get the crossing of the 102 there. Then it will land in Halifax Water sort of conservation lands. That's not the right word. Anyway, it's lands they don't want too disturbed because they feed the secondary watershed. But, they've been, they're on board with, putting something through there as long as we're, sensitive to their needs.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I think everyone who wanted to ask questions has done so. Any more? Okay. If not, we have an added item 10, Councillor Cuttle.
Thanks. I just wanted to take a brief opportunity to share some of the discussions I've been having with staff and council about different things. Dave, good update, but we missed one important thing, which was the approval of the new sidewalk level of service report, which I was very thrilled to see come before council and get approved. Until this point, we haven't had a sidewalk strategy. It's mostly being done based on resident requests and the recapitalization of streets. So having this new strategy with a funding plan is actually a really big deal, at least for me. I'm like, yes, because we know that our sidewalk network is disjointed in many places. So just some high level things about that. In the HRM 10-year capital plan from the active transportation capital account, there's going to be a new sidewalk budget of 5.5 million annually between 24-28. Of course, that has to get approved annually at council, but at least we have a strategy for that. And it's going to ramp up to 8 million annually in 2028. There's, I think, proposed 55 kilometers of new sidewalk in high-need areas in the next 10 years. So, yep, Dave, you're nodding. Thanks. If I go off track here, Dave, please jump in and correct me. I don't want to be inaccurate. So that, I mean, I think that's great news because, you know, sidewalks are an important component of active transportation. And I think some of them will be sidewalks, some of them will be multimodal corridors, and that, you know, also looking at doing some lighter, quicker, cheaper pilots and projects to try to get that infrastructure in faster. And I know that lighter, quicker, cheaper doesn't always mean the gold standard, but I think starting to lay it down and lay out the network is, you know, is a really, really positive step forward. So happy to see that. The other thing is, and Dave and I, we had a conversation about this, about walkway connections. So Douglas, to your point about Princess Place, you know, I know there's a number of those kind of connectors within Spryfield as well, that are kind of these little, you know, connector pieces that are really important to the overall, you know, walking and active transportation network, but they haven't had a lot of attention. And I mean, just a simple upgrading of them would really advance a lot of our active transit pathways throughout the city. So Dave and I had a conversation about that. Like he said to you, he said to me, like, show me where they are, and we'll look at what can be done. That's important for many reasons. One, it's you know, for active transportation, but it's also supports transit and walkable communities and kind of all these other, you know, big goals that we have at the city. One of the things, though, that I have noticed with that, and it's like literally like, you know, the stuff that falls between the cracks in the sidewalk, is around the maintenance of these walkways. So in the winter, not all of them, but some of them are plowed, and that falls under Public Works. And in the summer, the vegetation control often falls under Parks and Recreation. So we don't have good, like not long-term maintenance as in the paving piece, but I guess what would you call that? Like you know, annual seasonal maintenance. That's the word I'm looking for. Seasonal maintenance of these spaces. So in Spryfield, what we see is these pathways just will get completely overgrown, mostly with Japanese knotweed, and so I did send Dave. I was going to tell you this, but I can tell you now. I did send a message to Maggie from Parks and Rec and Brad from Public Works to put forward a motion to look at having some kind of a strategy, a priority strategy for both summer maintenance and winter maintenance to ensure that these pathways are taken care of. It's important for public safety, women's safety audit, recognize that it's controlling invasive species, better connected communities. So that is something I'm going to look at going forward and trying to figure out if it belongs in transportation or if it belongs in Park and Rec, and how we can bring those pieces together. So David, we might be talking soon. That's all I had to share. Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor. That's very informative and good news in many ways. I'd just like to add my feeling about walkways. I think I agree with you. They are they're overlooked. They're overlooked, and there's no standard maintenance protocol that applies to all of them, and there should be. So I'm with you on that 100%. I see that David has his hand up.
Just a couple things. So I sent y'all via email a link to the new sidewalk level of service report. And thank you for bringing that forward, Councillor. It's these things that seem like they were a long time ago, and you're like, oh, it's just since the last meeting. But you're right. That was a sort of a foundational piece of work to kind of set our direction, I think, for new sidewalks going forward. The brush clearing, so street-to-street walkways. So if it's a street-to-street walkway between two streets, then it's a public works responsibility. If it's between a street and a park, then it's mostly a park's responsibility. And then there are these walkways within parks. And right now, you know, the whether or not there's clearing and stuff like that is usually sort of in response to service requests. So to make the existing system right now work better, submit service requests, and you know, maybe there's another way to do it as well. I think there probably is.
Okay, thank you, David. I see Michelle has her hand up.
Yes, you're going to think all I do is complain here, but I just wanted to say a quick comment about, so as I was saying earlier, I went downtown today. I can drive a car and I rely on accessible parking. Well, there were a couple of accessible parking spots this morning that were completely filled in with snow. It's like, I know, you know, our city has nowhere to put stuff like that, but in the accessible spots because they're either at the end of a street or the beginning of a street. So, you know, I've dealt with this too at where I work at King's. Like I've had to tell them, you know, you need to clear the snow in front of an accessible button. And you know, all the doorways. Yeah.
Michelle, I just want to bring it. Sorry, I just want to hear to the chair. Just a point of order. I'm just wondering if we have, before we move on to another subject, if we've closed the subject on the points I raised. You're taking us in another direction, Michelle. I'd love to hear what you say, but I just want to make sure that we have some order to the meeting here, and we're done with that other conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I was aware that we were veering into a separate issue, which is snow clearance, and that's fine, but that wasn't the issue, the added item. So I think we should actually draw things to a close. The date of the next meeting is March 21st, and I actually won't be available for that, so Douglas will be chairing that meeting. Thank you, Douglas. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I need a mover.
So move.
Thank you, Peter. No seconder is required, so the meeting is closed, and I want to thank you all for being here. And we had, I think, a very productive session. And I'll see you, I guess, in April. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.